Welcome to Voices of the Case. In this episode, we want to tell you the story of Ethan Crumbley, the Oxford school shooter.
We're focusing today on a single, detailed source, the Wikipedia page that documents the tragic school shooting at Oxford High School in Michigan.
That's right, it's a difficult subject. But our aim here is to really unpack the information presented solely within that source. We'll look at the sequence of events, the immediate aftermath, the initial investigation details, basically what this specific document tells us about what happened on November 30, 2021.
Exactly. It's about understanding the narrative constructed by this particular source. It sets the scene. Oxford High School, Oxford Township, Michigan, and it lays out the terrible outcome right away. 4 students killed and 8 other people injured, one of whom was a teacher.
Okay. If you enjoy true crime, subscribe to Voices of the Case so you never miss an episode.
So diving into the source material, what does it tell us about the days or even the period just before the shooting itself? Was there anything mentioned, any context given? Yes, and this is quite striking in the source. It explicitly mentions that leading up to the event, there were apparently rumors going around. Rumors specifically about threats of a mass shooting.
Rumors among who?
According to the source, these were circulating among students and also parents. And it wasn't just idle chat, it seems. The source notes these rumors were significant enough that some students actually chose to stay home from school on November 30th because of them.
Wow, so there was a tangible level of unease, at least within parts of the school community, based on these rumors described in the source.
Precisely. It suggests a certain atmosphere of anxiety, perhaps, that the source wants to convey as preceding the event.
Does the source connect this directly to the school administration? Did they know about these specific mass shooting rumors?
Well, the source introduces another piece of information around the same time period. It mentions a separate incident involving vandalism, apparently. A deer head was thrown from the school roof.
Okay, kind of a bizarre incident on its own.
Right. And in response to that vandalism, the source says the school administration sent a note out to parents.
What did the note say?
In that communication, according to the source, the administration stated they were investigating rumors, plural, and were working to rule out any threats to the school.
So the source presents two things close together. Specific mass shooting rumors circulating among students, causing some to stay home, and then a school communication about investigating general rumors after a vandalism incident. Does the source explicitly link the school's note to the mass shooting rumors?
No, it doesn't draw that direct line. The source presents them as concurrent events or pieces of information from that time frame. The note mentioned is tied to the vandalism aftermath and investigating general rumors. The rumors among students, as described, were specifically about a potential mass shooting.
So the source kind of lays these facts side by side. It lets you see that there were different kinds of noise happening, the specific student fears, and the administration's more general acknowledgement of needing to investigate rumors after something else entirely.
Exactly. It paints a picture where different groups might have been hearing or focusing on different things. The source doesn't interpret why that might be. It just presents the information that way.
And then there's law enforcement. What does the source say about their awareness before the shooting?
The source includes a statement from the Oakland County Sheriff, Michael Bouchard. He stated, according to the source, that his office was not aware of any credible threats relating to the school before the shooting occurred.
Okay, so let's piece that together, just based on the source. You have students and parents concerned about mass shooting rumors, enough for some kids to stay away. You have the school acknowledging general rumors after a separate incident. And you have the sheriff's office saying they weren't aware of credible threats beforehand.
That's the picture the source provides. It really highlights, doesn't it, the potential complexities and maybe disconnects in how information about potential danger flows or doesn't flow within a community. Who knew what, when, and was it deemed credible? The source surfaces these questions implicitly.
It really does. It sets a sort of unsettling stage,
Yeah.
based purely on the facts presented. All right, let's move to the event itself, as detailed in the source. November 30th, what time did it start?
The source pinpoints the beginning of the shooting at approximately 12:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And the weapon involved?
It specifies a 9mm Sig Sauer SP 2022 semi-automatic handgun was used.
How were people inside the school alerted? What was the first sign for many?
The source states that the alert came over the school's intercom system. A voice announced that there was an active shooter situation in progress.
That must have been absolutely terrifying. What does the source describe happening immediately after that announcement?
Chaos and Immediate survival instincts kicking in. The source details teachers and students desperately trying to secure their locations, closing doors, barricading them, covering windows. It also makes a point to say students recognized this wasn't just another drill.
They knew it was real.
Yes. The source mentions accounts of students hearing loud noises first, and then the horrifying realization that those were gunshots. Then came the immediate lockdown actions.
Just an unimaginable scenario. How quickly did law enforcement get involved on the scene?
According to the source, the first 911 calls started coming in right at 12:51 p.m., the same time the source says the shooting began. Police response was reportedly immediate.
And the person responsible, the shooter.
The source identifies the shooter as a 15-year-old male student at Oxford High School. While the main body text might initially refer to him as the suspect or the perpetrator, the source's title and the info box do name him as Ethan Crumbley.
Okay. And how did the situation end? How was he stopped?
The source says he was apprehended by deputies, specifically a school resource deputy who was already assigned to the school and a second responding deputy. They arrested him.
Did the source mention any resistance?
It actually specifies he was arrested without weapons, which is slightly confusing phrasing at first glance, but I think it means without him using weapons against the arresting officers or resisting with force. Sheriff Michael McCabe is quoted in the source saying the shooter yielded without problems.
Right, okay. But he did still have the weapon on him.
Yes, that's the clarification the source immediately makes. Despite surrendering peacefully, it states he allegedly still had the 9mm handgun on him, loaded with 7 rounds of ammunition. Plus, he reportedly had 2 additional 15-round cartridges.
So he had significant ammunition remaining when he was taken into custody.
That's what the source indicates, yes.
Does the source give us a time frame for the shooting itself? How long did the act of violence last?
It estimates the duration was about 5 minutes. 5 minutes from start to when he was likely being apprehended or had stopped shooting. And it specifies the shooting occurred primarily in the south part of the school building.
5 minutes. It's hard to even comprehend the amount of damage and terror inflicted in such a short span.
Absolutely. The source really underscores the speed and intensity of the event.
Okay, so after the suspect was apprehended, the immediate danger was over, but the crisis was far from it. What happened next at the school, according to the source?
The school went into a full, total lockdown procedure. Then, the source describes the process of evacuating students. They weren't sent home directly from the school. They were moved to a nearby Meijer store, which presumably served as a reunification point.
A necessary precaution, I imagine, while the scene was secured.
Right. And the source mentions that authorities didn't just clear the building once. They conducted 3 separate, thorough searches of the entire school. This was to make absolutely sure there were no other victims hidden or missed, and also, of course, to begin collecting evidence.
That thoroughness makes sense. Did the source highlight any other specific details about the evacuation or the immediate moments after the arrest?
There's actually a really interesting detail included. It notes that at least one student apparently recorded a video on their phone during the evacuation process and posted it to social media.
Okay, and what was the significance of that?
Well, according to the source, law enforcement deputies actually saw this video, and it somehow helped them. The source says the video assisted the deputies in safely evacuating the students who were in that particular classroom shown in the video.
Wow, that's an unexpected intersection of social media and emergency response. A student's documentation actually aiding the tactical evacuation.
It's a small detail, but quite remarkable, isn't it? Shows how information, even in unexpected forms, can be critical in real time during a crisis.
Absolutely. Now let's turn back to the human costs, the casualties. The source provides the numbers. Can you recap those for us?
Yes. Tragically, the source confirms 4 students were killed in the shooting. It gives their ages as 14, 16, and 17 years old.
Just devastating. And they injured.
8 other people were wounded. This figure includes 7 students and 1 teacher.
Does the source provide any information on the condition of those injured, at least in the immediate aftermath?
It does give a snapshot as of the night of November 30th. At that point, 3 of the injured students were reported to be in critical condition. 1 was even on a ventilator. Another student was listed in reserved condition, which sounds serious, possibly stable but guarded.
And the others?
3 other students were described as stable, and the teacher, who had suffered a shoulder wound, had actually been treated and discharged from the hospital by that evening.
So a range of injuries, some clearly life-threatening at that point. It underscores the severity beyond the fatalities.
Definitely. The source paints a picture of not just loss of life, but significant ongoing medical crises for several others in those initial hours and days.
Okay, with the scene secured and victims attended to, the investigation would have kicked into high gear immediately. What does the source tell us about the initial focus of the investigation?
The primary focus initially, according to the source, was the school itself. Detectives were concentrating on processing the crime scene within the building, and a huge part of that was securing and reviewing footage from security cameras. The source calls the camera footage a primary focus.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Video evidence would be crucial to piecing together the timeline and the shooter's movements.
Absolutely. Understanding exactly where he went, when, who he encountered would all be vital.
Did the investigation extend beyond the school grounds right away?
Yes, it did. The source states that authorities executed a search warrant at the suspect's home pretty quickly.
And what were they looking for there?
They seized several items, including the suspect's cell phone. The source mentions other elements were taken as well, though it doesn't specify what those were. The goal, as stated in the source, was twofold: to gather evidence related to the shooting itself, and also to examine the suspect's digital communications leading up to it. The source specifically mentions looking into his social media emails prior, which likely means social media messages, posts, emails, any kind of digital trail.
So a clear effort from the very beginning to understand not just the what, but the why, potentially looking for motive or planning in his digital life.
Exactly. That digital footprint becomes incredibly important in investigations like these, and the source shows that was an immediate priority for law enforcement here.
What else did the source say about the suspect himself in these early stages? Information released by authorities.
Well, initially, because he was a minor, 15 years old, his name wasn't officially released by all authorities, though as we noted, the source itself does name him. The source mentions he was placed in custody at a juvenile facility, specifically in a suicide prevention prison, which probably means on suicide watch or under close observation with constant vigilance.
And crucially, what did authorities say about any prior knowledge they might have had about him? Any warning signs they were aware of?
This is a key point the source includes. It states that, according to authorities at that time, they had no prior information indicating behavioral issues or concerns about the suspect. No previous flags had apparently reached law enforcement.
That's significant, especially when juxtaposed with the earlier mention of rumors among students. It again points to that potential disconnect in awareness that the source lays out.
It does. The source presents the official stance as no prior known issues from the authorities' perspective, contrasting with the unofficial rumors channel mentioned earlier.
Now, let's talk about the weapon again, the 9mm handgun. The source provided some really critical details about where it came from, didn't it?
Yes, very critical. The source specifies the make and model 9mm Sig Sauer SP 2022. And it confirms that at least two 15-round cartridges were recovered, along with the pistol, in addition to the rounds still in it.
And the purchase history.
This is the part that really stands out in the source's timeline. It quotes Sheriff Michael Bouchard, stating that the suspect's father had legally purchased that specific handgun just 4 days before the shooting.
4 days. On Black Friday, the source mentioned.
Correct. Purchased by the father on Black Friday, November 26th, and used in the shooting by the son on Tuesday, November 30th. The source highlights that extremely short time frame.
That detail adds a whole other layer to the context leading up to the event. Does the source estimate how many shots were actually fired during the attack?
Based on the evidence recovered, particularly related to the weapon and ammunition, the source says authorities estimated at least 12 shots were fired.
Okay. And at the time this source was compiled or last updated, did investigators know exactly how the 15-year-old suspect got access to the gun his father had just bought, or how he brought it into school?
No. The source explicitly states that those points were still unknown at the time of its writing. How he obtained the pistol from his father, or wherever it was stored, and how he managed to get it inside the school building undetected, those were open questions in the immediate aftermath as reported by this source.
So, key questions remained unanswered in the initial phase covered by this source.
Definitely. The source captures that uncertainty.
Beyond Oxford Township, this tragedy obviously sent shockwaves much further. What does the source tell us about the reactions from political leaders and the wider community?
The source notes condolences and reactions came from the highest levels. It mentions President Joe Biden expressing his condolences. Also, Representative Alyssa Slotkin, who represents the area, spoke out.
And the state leadership.
Yes, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer released a statement. The source quotes her saying she was devastated for the students, families, and the entire community. And significantly, she framed the issue broadly, calling gun violence a public health crisis.
That framing is notable. Did she take any other actions mentioned?
Yes. The source states that Governor Whitmer ordered all U.S. and Michigan flags across the state to be flown at half-staff as a mark of respect and mourning.
Were there other notable public reactions captured in the source?
It mentions the local impact, citing the captain of the Detroit Red Wings hockey team. Apparently, the team learned about the shooting just before their game on the evening of November 30th. After the game, the captain offered condolences, calling it an indescribable tragedy. It shows how quickly the news permeated even local sports communities.
And within the Oxford community itself, how did people respond immediately to try and cope with this horror?
The source highlights a strong community response focused on gathering and support. It specifically mentions that 3 separate prayer services were held just on the night of the shooting, November 30th.
3 services on the same night.
Yes, indicating a widespread need for people to come together. And the source notes these services were attended by hundreds of people, showing a large outpouring of community grief and solidarity right away.
It paints a picture of a community reeling, but also trying to find solace together immediately.
Exactly. The source captures both the shock and the immediate instinct to gather and mourn collectively.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this a bit. We've walked through the information presented in this Wikipedia source. The lead-up, the event, the aftermath, the initial investigation.
Yeah.
What are some of the key connections or takeaways that emerge from how the source itself presents these facts?
One of the most unavoidable connections the source lays bare is that timeline concerning the weapon. The purchase by the father on Black Friday, just 4 days before his son used it in the shooting. The source places these facts close together, making that proximity impossible to ignore.
Right. It doesn't explicitly state an opinion on that, but the factual presentation itself is powerful.
Precisely. Another major thread is the whole issue of prior awareness, or the conflicting signals about it. The source puts the student-parent rumors about a specific mass shooting threat right alongside the school's communication about investigating general rumors after a different incident, and then adds the sheriff's statement about no credible threats being known to his office.
Yeah, that juxtaposition is really central to how the source sets the stage.
It really is. Without interpreting, the source forces you, the reader, to grapple with those different layers of information or potential lack of information flow that existed simultaneously in the community. It implicitly raises questions about how threats are perceived, communicated, and assessed.
And the source also makes a point of detailing the rapid response once the alarm was raised, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It notes the 911 call starting right at 12:51, the immediate police response, and the suspect being apprehended within minutes, reportedly just 5 minutes after the shooting began. The source presents the police and deputy response as swift and decisive in ending the active shooting phase.
And the details about the weapon ammunition found on him upon arrest are also presented as key factual points about how that confrontation ended.
Yes, the peaceful surrender, but with significant ammo remaining, that's clearly laid out.
And finally, the initial investigation steps highlighted by the source, focusing immediately on school security footage and the suspect's digital history that tells us where authorities immediately look for answers.
Right. It shows the standard procedure, perhaps, but also underscores the importance placed on digital evidence and visual records in understanding such events in the modern era.
So this deep dive, relying solely on this Wikipedia source, has really allowed us to trace the sequence provided, the context, the terrible event itself, the immediate responses from within the school and from law enforcement, the initial investigative pathways, and the broader community and political reactions.
It gives us a factual framework, a chronology, and a set of key details as compiled and presented in this specific source document. It's a snapshot based on the information available and curated there.
And reflecting on everything the source presented, especially those different threads of information circulating before the shooting, the student rumors, the school's note on general rumors after the vandalism, the sheriff's statement on no credible threats known to them, it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Considering how this source lays out that information, what does it suggest about the challenges communities face in recognizing and acting on potential warning signs when information might be scattered, perceived differently, or not reach the right channels effectively? It highlights the complex and sometimes tragic difficulty of connecting the dots before it's too late.
That's a powerful point to ponder, drawn directly from the way the source structures the available information. It underlines the immense challenge of threat assessment in real-world situations.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Case. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.